Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Oh, right already. I think we're all set. And here comes Alan. Awesome. Welcome once again to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. As always, I am your host, Duck, and today is Photoshop edition. And I actually got something pretty interesting for you guys. We're going to piggyback off of something that we did last month, which was we played around with the intentional camera movement in order to get some blur effects. And also we used Photoshop to kind of replicate a blur effect to create something a little bit more abstract as far as, with some of your landscape stuff. At that time, I was also looking at the work of a photographer. Oh yeah, my video is like super hot. I'm seeing like hot spots, and I don't know why. So I apologize if the video is looking a little weird. Anyway, I was looking at the work of other photographers who are doing a lot of this abstract intentional camera movement, abstract blur effects. And I came across a photographer's work in passing, and I failed to save it. I failed to make a note of the artist's name, and I wanted to touch a little bit on it, and I figure we'll save it for another day. So here it is. I actually found the photographer's name. His name is Pep Ventosa, and if you look up his work, he's got a awesome portfolio online. Pep, P-E-P, Ventosa, V-E-N-T-O-S-A, and his work in particular is pretty interesting because he does a blend of images, all kind of not really blurred. Okay, he doesn't blur the images, but what he does is he takes multiple images from different vantage points. He takes multiple images with different zoom lengths, and in particular, some of his more interesting stuff is where he'll take a photograph of a tree and he'll photograph it in 360 degrees, all the way around the tree, and then he'll layer blend the image with all the layers, and it gives you this kind of fuzzy abstract image. Okay. Here is some of his work from his street work. All right. And if you, hopefully this is coming across. Oh, let me share so that you guys can see this a little bit better. There we go. That should be a little better. If you notice that there are, you can pretty much tell that there are multiple frames with the same subject throughout the composition. All right, like this one you can really tell. And from what I've been able to read is he will do I'm saying he, but I really don't know. Is Pep a boy's name or a girl's name? I don't know. I guess I should have probably looked.
Pep is a male.
All right, thank you. I kind of thought so. I guess I should have double checked that before going live here, right? Thanks, Bill. but he'll do a blend of, anywhere from a few frames all the way up to, 20, 30, 50 frames. And if we look at this particular um, image of the Manhattan Bridge, uh, you can see the cables, and there's a ton of them there. So that gives you a little bit of a clue that he probably used, a good 20 frames to create this. And it just gives it this very surreal look to these images. And obviously, what makes these images work is that there is typically one area that is very dominant in the scene, because he still follows the rules of photography, and which is you want a strong subject, you want a point of focus. And what he does is he manipulates that point of focus through his editing, even though there are multiple layers of the same scene at slightly different angles, slightly different focal lengths. He still maintains that strong focal point. And what makes these work the best is, as you look through his work, all right, these are all very iconic locations. So even with all that busyness around it, it's still very obvious as to what it is that's being photographed. Okay, it's very obvious what the subject is. It's very recognizable. All right. And he uses that to an advantage, because otherwise it would probably be too busy. All right, so here is Champs-Élysées in Paris. It's the Arc de Triomphe. Very, very popular piece of architecture in Paris. Very well recognized. But if you look at the greenery, the trees that line Champs-Élysées, you can't really make heads or tails of what that is. We can see tree shapes. We can see people shapes. We can see vehicle shapes. Excuse me. Oh boy, here we go. But nothing is distinct. And it really plays in with the abstract aspect of these images, because the trees and the people and the vehicles, while they are part of the environment, they're not the most essential part to tell the story. It complements the story. It speaks to the story of being, a tourist area, being a pedestrian area, but it doesn't pull the attention away from the main subject. The other thing I noticed about his work is that because all these overlays, being done on top of each other, creates a texture that doesn't, I don't want to say blur, because there is no blurring going on here. Okay, it's just using overlays and blend modes with the overlays to get that multiple exposure feel to these images. And because of that, because there's a lot of overlay, it creates a lot of texture. But within the texture, we can, if we investigate it, we can look for those shapes that are recognizable to us. We can see the the car shapes. Here's a motorcycle right here. Here's another car right here. All right. We can see the people. There are pedestrians walking. There are a person walking here. All right. There are people. There's another one crossing the street. All right. And we can see all these pedestrians on the sidewalks. It invites us to really look at the image beyond the focal point. All right. So rules rules of engagement with a photograph. Our eyes go to areas of brightness first. Okay. And we can see, like in this particular example, we have this area of brightness just leading the eye in. Areas of sharp focus, okay? And in this case, it's not so much out of focus, in focus, because we're not distinguishing the out of focus areas as readily as if it was a single frame, right? But all this texture gives us that feeling of being out of focus because nothing is lined up except for the main subject. This area is very clearly discernible. There is a little bit of the overlay going on there. The double exposure, the multiple exposure, I should say, going on in there, but it's not as drastic as, let's say, this area where we can see this street lamp in 3 different positions here. All right. So we're able to resolve the detail a little bit easier in that area. And of course, it brings our eye straight into it. But all this other detail around us, once we come here, he's like encouraging us to go out and explore all these other areas. It's like a puzzle. We want to try to make out what is all this hidden in detail inside these areas. Okay. And to be honest, I just find this work fascinating.
Hey,
And
Doc,
yeah.
go back to that last picture for just 1 minute. One day, it looks like more on the, well, I guess it would be the right side of the screen, but it looks like the image is like, looks like scratched negatives, and they're lined up to, for they head right for the arc, I guess and there's similar lines, not as sharp on the other side.
Yeah.
There's ones on the way. I'm wondering, is that part of it, or is that just maybe there's some other stuff going on to give it that illusion? I know that's where a car is, but it seems like
Yeah.
that's
So obviously obviously each image is going to be unique, and once I go to explain how to do this, you're going to see for yourself what I mean by this. But there is a level of chance going on here, unplanned chance. And as complex as this looks, once you understand how it's done, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. There's a lot of thought in the design aspect, but you have to give over a certain amount of control over to that chaos that is created by the overlapping images. All right. So the term Bob Ross, painter,
yeah.
he used to say happy little accidents, because when you're painting, there is a certain amount of controlled chaos when that brush hits the canvas. All right. He has a certain amount of control, but how the paint is applied, how the bristles react when it hits the canvas, there's a certain level of chaos. So he used to say, happy little accidents when the brush did something that he didn't expect it to. And I see the same thing here when multiple layers are overlapped onto each other. You know, you have a loose vision of how they're going to react, but it's not until you actually see the layers interacting do you get a sense of how they're going to interact. So there is a sense of these happy little accidents. And you can control them to a certain extent. You can manipulate the layers, you can manipulate the blend modes, and obviously, as I'll show you, you can use masks, in certain areas to kind of control that chaos. But what makes it work is allowing that chaos to come through. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. So obviously the architectural stuff, the street work. I mean, look at this. Okay, Eiffel Tower has been photographed a million and one different ways, but I've never seen it photographed like this. This is so unique. And I don't know if I can zoom in here. All right, if I zoom in, it's not crystal sharp. All right, it's not tack sharp. Okay, you can see that there are some overlapped parts of it. Okay, but it's maybe one or two frames that are overlapped, and obviously one of them is a lot stronger than the others. All right, and what that does is it gives that the tower a lot of prominence. But if we look at, for example, the areas around here, there was no care taken to make one frame stronger than the other. All right. As a matter of fact, you can see that there's a certain opacity to some of these frames, and where they overlap, that opacity builds up in a very unique way. All right, it's almost like kind of like that stroboscopic movement effect that's used in like animation. It's almost that. All right, so he's got, here it is, made the Radio City Music Hall sign very prominent. And then just the chaos of the street, it just grabs you. The trees in the round is another one. These are the ones that first introduced me to his work. If we look at this. You can see the ghost image of a car along the bottom. All right. And all these lines, I can assume, are probably power lines that were in the vicinity. And he just left them there because when they're all overlapped, it creates this marvelous texture. All right. We can see ghost images of buildings in the background. Okay. Here's another one. And what he does is he just finds a subject that is isolated enough that allows him to walk around sometimes all the way around, sometimes maybe just halfway around. And he just layers and layers and layers all of these. All right. And it's fabulous. Now, obviously, he's been perfecting this for years. What I'm going to show you is nowhere near to this level, but it's going to introduce you to some of the technique, right? And to be honest, what I'm going to show you may not even be everything that he does. He has not published how he does it. Good for him. He's got his secret sauce and he's keeping it tight to the chest because this is his bread and butter. If anybody can do it, then there would be no Pep Ventosa, right? Ventosa. So all I can do is, based on what others have done to try to replicate it, and based on my understanding of Photoshop, I got some ideas. The other thing is, he uses a ton of images, a ton of them, 20, 30, 40, 50. The examples I'm doing today, in order to keep it manageable for a tutorial, are not going to be anywhere near 20, 30, 40, or 50 images. That would probably destroy my computer. So, especially if I'm streaming it, all right? So it's going to be a little bit of a dumbed down. But the one thing I have to say is that having watched, Carousel Syndrome, having watched what other photographers and some retouchers have done in trying to analyze his work, I think I came on to something that's a little bit slightly different than some of these other tutorials. It's a simple little addition that I haven't seen anybody else do. So it's going to be kind of like my take on this whole process. But if we look at it, I mean, we instinctively know what this is. All right. As abstract as it is, we all understand what it is. There's enough information for us to determine that this is a carnival ride. All right. And, this one, the carousel. But it's so abstract that we don't see any of the detail. And it's amazing. So he relies a lot on texture and color. All right. And if you heard me in the past, what are the three things that you're always going to be editing in any photograph? And that's light, texture, and color. Okay. So this plays very heavily on light and texture and color. Okay. Any questions on this intro here? Okay. All right. Now I'm going to underwhelm you with my attempts. Okay. My very basic attempts. All right. Let me. Oops. All right. Obviously, I did not use, 20 images. I think I only took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 frames for this. Okay. But you can see the multiple exposures going on. It won't let me draw. Okay, hold on. Oops. There we go.
Look, was this all on a tripod?
Nope, all handheld. All handheld. All right. You can
And so what you've done up to now, you took a bunch of pictures and you brought them all as layers into,
Yep.
or this, okay.
Nope. I'm going to show you the results that I got, and then I'm going to walk you through my whole process. Okay. So my goal was to try to replicate the fundamentals of the process, but like I said, keeping it small enough that we can create a tutorial without going into 50 layers, which would take 5 hours to do. So, all right, next one here. All right. Oh, so the first one, this first one, it's like, let's see what I got. All right. The one thing I noticed about his work was, of course, that he's always got that one point of interest that really stands out. So in this particular case, when I came on the scene, or when I headed out, my idea was to photograph the bridge, and use the bridge that goes from here in Shelton over to into Derby. I wanted to use the bridge as that focal point. But when I got there, the building just kind of like overpowered the scene, and the bridge looked very small in the whole composition. So I decided to shift, and I used kind of like this edge here, very roughly, and I'll show you what I mean by that. I used that very roughly as my kind of like guide for capturing each subsequent frame. Okay. It was very experimental. I really didn't know what the heck I was doing. All right. But after this first image, I walked a little bit further up the street and came across this one. And I said, okay, this one here is in Shelton. It's a very iconic landmark building. This is the Champs-Élysées of Shelton. This is the Eiffel Tower of Shelton. It's the Pierpont building. And so I said, I need kind of like a focal point. So obviously I kind of used the sign in between the two windows as my focal point, right? And this came out, I think it came out a little bit more successful than the previous image, because at least now, we have that texture going on the periphery. It allows our eyes to really isolate that focal point. If I show it to anybody here in Shelton, they're going to immediately recognize the building. So I think this particular image, aside from the fact that it's only like maybe 6 frames, it pretty much ticked off everything that I observed about Pep's work. All right. This one, same building. I just concentrated on the door to the restaurant. And I wanted to kind of highlight that. And what I ended up doing is there were no lights on. All right. That I artificially lit that lamp. So I used a little bit of that day to night editing in order to create a more of a focal point. And as I was putting this together, it became a little less about the door and a little bit more about the lamp, which I'm okay with, because we can still see that door right there. Okay. And of course, we have all the texture that allows us to really, go and explore everything around it. There are no pedestrians here. That would have been really, really awesome. I would love to take a trip into New Haven, during the day when there's a lot of people out there, finding a nice location and utilizing this technique with a lot of foot traffic. I think that would be friggin' cool. Okay.
That would also make for some interesting spec work. Take this back and show it to. I know where this restaurant is. Go. This would look good in your advertising.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
if you got it so that they could just see the sign of Michi's and
yeah,
a couple other things,
yeah,
Like when
exactly.
Michi's,
Yeah.
like, in the summertime, they really green it up. That could,
Yes, yes.
I mean, go out with it, like you said, in New Haven. That would be kind of neat. That's what I thought of when I first saw it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're absolutely right. Obviously, you have to understand. I kind of pulled these, last minute for today's tutorial, but with some preparation, with some pre-planning, with some forethought, which is what I'm sure Pep does. Pep doesn't just go on and say, "Oh, what am I'm just gonna photograph such and such today." No, he makes sure that he gets the time of day right. He gets the angle of view right, the whole nine yards. So everything that goes into making a photograph, you would use for this. Right next to the bridge is a little alleyway. uh, it's informally called Viaduct Square. And I decided I was going to see if I could use the sign as the pivot point. So as I kind of walked around the sign, I kept the sign in a relatively same location. And you can see that the background now kind of, you really can't tell, because the buildings, let's see, really can't, oh yeah, here we go. This sign is the same as this sign, is the same as this sign, which is the same as that sign. Okay? So you can, which is the same as that sign. Okay? And there's probably another one somewhere in between, who knows? So that gives you an idea of how much travel I went around that sign. I went literally from all the way from the left hand side all the way around to the right hand side. And I'm going to show you all the raw images for all this too. But what happens is, of course, you have that parallax view. That the parallax view is when you're focusing on something in front, that background is going to drastically change depending on your angle, right? So that's what happened to the building in the back. It went from looking down the alleyway when I started the rotation to looking square at the building when I finished my rotation. All right. And it gave this, very indescript feel to the background. So if the object of this image is to showcase the sign, I think that, succeeded. But as an artistic image, nah, this would fail on so many levels because it's not very interesting. It doesn't really invite you to care for the subject. It's a wooden sign. So having a subject that you can really bring your subjects in with obviously plays a very important role here. All right. This one here, I think, is probably my favorite of the whole bunch. And what's not so obvious in this particular image is that, all right, well, first of all, you can tell that we're right next to the bridge. Again, this is an alleyway that goes under the bridge, and right next to it, there's this little patio for a restaurant. But before you get to the restaurant, there are a couple of shops that you have to walk past. And as you're walking down this narrow balcony, on the left-hand side are these posts with these lanterns. And they're equally spaced apart. And there were like, I don't know, there were like 8 of them. So I looked at that and says, okay, we have a repetition of pattern here. If I place each consecutive lamppost in the same exact position in my frame at the same exact distance, camera to that post, I can overlap, because they were all the same, they were all identical. I can overlap all those posts on that one spot, okay, right here. And do a blend of these, and we'll see what happens. And
3 photographs you made there?
I'm sorry?
3 photographs?
No, there were like 8 of them.
I see.
All right. So what I did is I played around with that repetition of pattern. All right. So if we were to, if this was like, for example, the first one, the second one would be here, the third one would be here, the fourth one would be here, fifth one would be here, and so on, going all the way down. Okay. So let's see if I can do this. All right. So here's the alleyway. We had one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, and then the final one, right? So what I did is I positioned myself here at a certain distance, all right? Then I moved up, positioned myself, moved up, positioned myself, moved up, positioned myself, so that I was always the same distance and the same angle to all these posts. Follow?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so I used each one of these posts as my reference. All right. And that was going to be the key item that's going to be the same in all the overlays. Okay. And this is the result that I got. And I think it's pretty awesome. All right. What's not readily discernible on the right-hand side, all right, is that this is a conglomerate of all the shops along that alleyway. Okay. Obviously, I put the restaurant, I made that look a little stronger than anything else, because the restaurant had the most visual appeal. It had the most amount of texture. It had the potted plants. It had these, I don't even know. They're those heaters. I don't know. There's a name for those type of heaters, right? They had the tables and the chairs. Okay, everything else was just kind of like regular glass front stores. And I'll show you the raw images so you can see exactly what I was working with. But when we think about it, everything you see on the right hand side is all the shops along that path that I took, and it's just it's kind of cool. because we're in essence, we're compressing all that distance. We're compressing it into, one tiny little area. Okay. All right. And I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So that first one here, let me bring these up. All right. That first one was 10 frames. The Pierpont was 12 frames. The one that I turned day to night was 7 frames. The Viaduct was only 5. And that last one was 9 frames. I thought it was 8. It was 9. Okay. All right. So let me, you know what? I'll expand that last one. Okay. I'll expand that last one. Let's just take that and that one. I'll mark it green, and I will just concentrate on the greens. Okay. All right. So the first one is, of course, the composite. All right. And let's see. What order are we in? Capture time. Yeah, capture time. Okay. Oh, it's let's go with file name. Oh, why is it not? Okay, hold on. It's out of order here for some reason. This is my last frame. Okay, 34, 33, 32, 31. Okay. 30, 29, 28, 27. Okay, now we're in order. Okay. So here we see the full entire length. Okay. And what I did is I used, you know how you have the little indicators, your focal point indicators, right? All right, I have 9 on mine. All right, what I did is I just basically took this and I placed it right on that lamp. Okay. And what I did is I judged from that lamp to the edge of my my viewfinder, and I placed the edge of the viewfinder at the base of that column. So that right there gave me my cue of where to position myself in relation to the column. Okay. So what I did is I positioned myself, took a shot, moved to the next one. All right. And we're still there. We're at the bottom, and we got the if we were to draw a line, that's my halfway point. Okay. Took a shot, moved forward, took a shot, moved forward, took a shot, moved forward, move forward, move forward, move forward, move forward. All right. And that was it. I ran out of columns. All right. So that was all right. And as you can see, like I mentioned earlier, these were all handheld. Okay. I was actually on a tripod. Okay. So my camera height pretty much stayed the same. All right. And if we look at the ground, there are pavers. All right. And what I did is I just used this line here on the pavers as my reference moving forward. Okay. So I gave myself these reference points to work off of in order to build the image or I should say images. Okay. And that's all I did, as I just, lined it up, move forward, lined it up, move forward. But if you notice, my angle's a little off. All right. Nothing was level. Okay. Which leads me to the next tip. As you manipulate these images, all right, in order to line things up, frames need to shift. All right. So you need to make sure that when you're in the field capturing images, that you give yourself extra room. Shoot wider than you need, because as you manipulate the images, lining them up, right, you're going to need to crop in order to avoid all that mess on the outside. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right. All right. Next thing I did is I went and quote unquote normalized my images here in Lightroom. All right. This particular one didn't really need a lot. I just pretty much just did the, played around with the exposure. But, let's see. On the day to night one, okay? The day to night one, that's a different story. That one I took a little bit more prep work here in Lightroom. So what I did for this one is I clicked on the first, shift click on the last, all right, in order to select my entire range. Went into my develop mode, and as you can see, I cooled things off a lot, all right, because when I came into this, I said, oh, wouldn't it be cool if that lamppost was lit? Which I says, okay, perfect. I'll do the day to night, all right, so which means cooling things down, dropping the exposure, all right. In this case, not too much, because I actually dropped the exposure with a mask, all right. So if you look, my exposure is actually at a +1, and that's because when I applied the vignette, it kind of darkened things up, all right. But my highlights went down, my blacks went down for contrast, okay, and that was pretty much it. And of course, my saturation went up a little bit, okay. So as I am manipulating this, because I have all of them selected, make sure that your auto sync is on, okay. You want auto sync on, because what that's going to do is everything you do to that first image is going to apply it across the board to every image. All right. Excuse me. All right. And here it is. My masks. The vignette. I'll show the overlay. Okay. All that does is it darkens around the outside. All right. What does that do? It pulls a little bit focus towards the center. Then I did my light glow, and then I did a smaller one just to really brighten up that light bulb. And then I added a little bit of a spotlight just on the door. All right. So all that together creates, excuse me. Here's the before. Here's the after. Oh, and you can see I straightened it out. I straightened my uprights. Okay. So before, after. All right. And all that does is it brings attention right to that door frame, right to the door of the restaurant, which is what I wanted, right? All right. Once I had my initial image, I then had to deselect everything and then go one by one and reposition the two masks for the lamps and the mask for the door. Because remember, as I'm walking down the street, everything is shifting in my frame. All right. So I can't just do a global slam bam across the board. I can get all my settings in place, but then I have to fine tune it in order to position the masks where I need to. So I just go down and because most of the work was already done, it was just a matter of just grabbing the mask and sliding it into place, putting it, over the lamppost where it needs to be. And that was relatively very easy to do. Okay. And that was it. Once that's done, the next step is fairly easy. All right. And that's to bring it into Photoshop. All right. So before I do that, all right, I did the same exact thing with all these others. You can see the perspective of the building really, really shifts considerably. All right. And it's that perspective shift that creates that chaos in the overlays. All right. But again, you need that kind of like one central piece to kind of use as your focal point. And in this case, I just used the sign of the building. Okay. All right. And this one. All right. This was my first one. All right. I applied a perspective correction, all right, on the building in order to make it more looking upright. And you can see how, you lose a little bit of information in the corners. Okay. Again, this was an afterthought. I really didn't think about it when I was in the field. It wasn't until I opened these up that I saw, well, you know what? I think these buildings would look better if they were all upright. Looking backwards, I've learned something from this. All right. I had my 24-105 lens on here. All right. I was across the street. I'm shooting at 24 millimeters. Okay. In hindsight, I probably could have done this with an ultra wide, 10 millimeter. And it would have given me that little bit of extra room in order to get probably, a stronger image and gotten the entirety of the building into the scene without cutting it off. Okay. But like they say, hindsight's 20/20. Okay. But as we go through, all right, you have to keep in mind the perspective is going to change. All right. And I want you to pay attention in particular to the wires that are holding the signal lights as I move through. All right. Yeah, actually, I think these are out of sequence also. This should be the last image. Last image. There we go. All right. At kitty corner from the building. And as I move across the street, you can see those wires, the perspective of those wires are changing drastically. Oops. Okay. I I really wasn't thinking about the wires. Again, all experimental. I was pretty much concentrating on the building. It wasn't until I put the thing together that I realized, wow, those wires are really doing some crazy, crazy stuff. You know, putting a lot more interest in an otherwise blank area, right? So if we look at this image and we look at a similar one, okay, we have all this empty space up here, crisscrossed by a couple of wires that by themselves is kind of boring, you know? As a matter of fact, you know, a lot of people go way out of their way to get rid of wires, electrical wires from their images, just in order to clean it up and make it look better. Okay, but with this technique, if we keep them all in, that blank area suddenly gets a lot of interest. We want to explore it a little bit more, you know? Okay. All right. Any questions on setting it up in the field? Pretty straightforward. Okay. One thing I want to note is that I was stepping roughly about 2 feet. Each time I took a step, I went about 2 feet. And you can see that the perspective change on 2 feet is quite drastic. If I were to do this again and really try to replicate Pep's work and understanding that he does, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 frames, I'm probably going to take a lot smaller steps. You know, just because of that parallax effect. Okay. All right. Items closer to you are going to travel further than items further away because of parallax. Okay. All right. Let's do this one. Okay. All right. So click on the first, shift click on my last. I did all my edits, changed everything from day to night. First thing we're going to do is we're going to right click on the whole stack and we're going to edit in open as layers in Photoshop. All right. And then give it a while. Let it build its stack. Okay. Oh, did I? Oh, yeah, I grabbed the first one as well. So let's get rid of that one. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What do I got? Oh, missed one. Okay. Control E. Let's bring that in. Okay, so this one, let's add it to the stack. Okay. All right. Close that up. We don't need that one. All right. If we go through, we can see bam, 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 all the way to, let's bring that to the bottom, to that. Okay. All right. So these are all now stacked one on top of the other. What I need to do is now, at this point, I said, okay, what's going to be my focal point? All right. As I was editing in Lightroom, I knew that that light post was going to be my focal point. Okay. So now what I can do is, if I want to be able to see the entire stack, I'm going to select the entire stack, and I'm just going to drop down the opacity, all right, some to a point where I can kind of sort of see all the poles, all the posts, okay? And you can see, let me zoom in here, that they're all pretty much in that general vicinity, okay? Again, this is because when I was at the scene, I knew pretty much what it was that I wanted to focus on, all right? So by placing your strongest visual point and keeping that consistent across all the frames is going to help a lot, okay? All right, so I don't really have to do a lot of adjustment, okay? I'm going to bring the opacity back up to 100. I am going to go ahead and I have my bottom, my base plate, okay? All right, usually when you do compositing, you have one base plate. In a lot of composites, like when we do the multiplicity composites, I always tell people you want to shoot a blank plate, and that's going to be the one that you build everything up on top of. In this case, we don't really need that base plate, all right, because they're all going to be, it's not quite a composite as it is an image blend, okay? So the next image, I'm just going to go ahead and make it visible, select the layer, and I'm just going to drop the opacity down a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to move that layer so that the lampposts line up, okay? And now, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I have a reference. I have two references. I have that barrel underneath the pole, all right? And I have the globe, the glass globe of the lamp, okay? So I can position that the top of the pole and position the bottom of the pole. All right, so what I can do is holding the shift key, if I move this, I can scale it, all right? And I can use that barrel as a reference for the bottom part of the pole. And I can use the globe of the lamp as a reference for the, for the top of the pole. All right, follow? Okay. All right, I'm going to turn off the visibility on that one. I'm going to go to the next one up. I'm going to drop down the visibility, make it, you know, a little bit transparent. And I'm just going to go through all of them like this until I can get them all lined up. All right. And another thing you can do is, of course, you can micro nudge things with the arrow keys. All right. That looks pretty good. Turn the visibility off, go up one, bring the opacity down, and just make your way through the entire image like that, okay? That's good. Turn that off, turn that on. Bring the opacity down. And it doesn't have to be 100% precise. again, that happy accident is what you're going for. Okay. Line it up, scale it. There we go. Scale. There we go. In position. Final one. Oops. Bring the opacity down. Size this up. Whoa. Went a little bit too far. All right, this one has to really scale up because this was the one I was furthest away from. Okay. All right. Once I have all of them kind of in place, all right, I'm going to light them all up. I'm going to select all of them, and I'm going to set my opacity to 33%. Okay? The whole entire stack, 33%. Okay? Why 33%? It was an arbitrary number that I picked that seemed to work really, really well as a starting point for all my images. All right? And this is where I diverge a little bit from what everybody else does. Everybody else keeps that bottom image at 100%. All right? And then they build up on that. Okay? What I decided to do is I'm going to rely on layer blends on all the images, including the base layer. So I'm going to turn that to 33. And of course, what happens is you get a little bit of that transparency coming through, right? And you can see the checkerboard indicating that there are transparent pixels. So to correct for this, what I did was I created a solid color layer, right? So you go all the way down to the bottom, little circle, half black, half white, solid color layer, and I make my layer solid black. And I got to make sure that that goes on the bottom of everything. And now all of a sudden you'll see that the transparent pixels are gone. Okay. Now, why black? All right. This was another decision that I came upon from experimentation. When I first started, I started with a white layer. But as I was playing around with the blend modes, what I found was that the best blend modes seemed to be the modes that added light. All right. So if we go to our blend modes, all right, which are right here in our layer stack where it says normal, you click on that, you're going to get all of these. The first set makes things darker. The second set makes things lighter. And then the third set, excuse me. The third set plays around with that 50% middle gray, right? I don't want to darken these images. This one in particular is already dark enough as it is. All right. So the blend modes that I'm going to play around with are going to add light. And if I'm adding light to something that's already light, what's going to happen? It's going to start blowing things out. So if I start off with black, no matter what I do, unless I really, really start pushing the layers, all right, I'm going to be able to control my highlights a lot better because I'm starting with a black base, okay? Because what we're doing is we're adding light. Each consecutive layer is adding light, okay? In this particular case, we're still using the normal mode so far, okay? And reducing the transparency in order to allow the individual layers to come through, all right? And if we zoom in, like in here, for example, all right, we can see that progression of transparency going from being a little bit more opaque here in this first one. Oh, can I draw? All right, to very translucent here in the last one. Okay, and if we turn off this last one, okay, we can see that, oh, they're almost right on top of each other. Okay, the bottom of the stack, all right, is the more transparent because we have multiple layers on top, okay? And the way others were doing it is that they were giving each layer different transparencies. They would play around with a blend mode. Yeah, that kind of looks good. Play around with the transparency. Yeah, that kind of looks good. But it was pretty much a crapshoot. I said, looking at Pep's work, it's not quite a crapshoot, especially when you can see that progression of transparency getting more and more opaque as the layers build up, okay? So that kind of led me to think that, if we start with all the layers at the same transparency and then just manipulate the blend modes, we can get a better result. And that's exactly what I found out. All right. So now all my layers are now at 33%. Okay. And they're all on normal mode. Okay. The other thing about this is it gives me a starting point. And if I want to make this into an action, it's very easy to create an action that gets me close. And then from here, I can take that and make it less or more transparent, depending. Okay? So this is something that I can control as I am building my process. All right? So keep it at 33. All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start playing around with the blend modes. And like I said, the most useful ones were lighten, screen, overlay, soft light, and hard light. So the first two in the lighten mode and the first three in the overlay mode, which is the 50% gray mode. Okay. And at this point, what I did is I alternated. I skipped the base one, or the bottom layer, moved up, skipped, clicked, all right, skip, click, all right. And what I did is I changed, I went through and see which one's going to give me kind of like the best results. Okay, soft light, screen. I kind of like the lighten mode. All right. And this allows me to kind of control some of the lighting. Okay. And at this point, it's definitely experimental to a certain extent. All right. It's not fully experimental because I do have a range of tools that I can use to manipulate the image. It's not like I'm experimenting with all the tools, okay? I've limited it to five tools, all right? And it's a matter of finding out which one really works best, okay? If it gets a little bit muddy, you can play around and see if one of the darken modes will work, okay? Maybe somewhere in the middle is, so that's something you can play around with, all right? So this is where little experimentation, little salt and pepper to taste, okay? Now it's like, okay, we got all this chaos going on with the overlaps, with the overlapping images, but now I need to concentrate on my main focus, which is this area right here. If I keep it all, what is it? All 7 images, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all 7 images intermixed, it makes it, convoluted. So I have to reduce the number of images being used here, okay? And I can do, a couple of different ways. I can create masks to remove some of the center part. Or what I found was a little bit easier is, all right, see if you can follow me on this. This image is, here, let me change this to white temporarily, or let me just make it brighter temporarily, just so you can see, okay? This image is looking at it dead on, all right? So we see the post is directly in front of the door, all right? Not, if this was a standalone image, not a good composition. Make sense? All right. If I go to my first one, my top layer, okay, we'll do the same thing. Here's my post, here's my door, and it's half hidden by stuff on the sidewalk. All right. There's a big gap here. Not the most ideal composition. However, if we go to one of the middle ones, this is my light, and let me turn that to normal for now, okay? We can see a little bit more of the door, all right? Here's my pole. It's a little bit closer, okay? We might even say, all right, let's try that. Oh, this one's pretty good, all right? Here's my pole, here's my door. A much stronger composition, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that one, okay, and I'm going to move that to the top of my stack, all right? And let's see, which one was this? This was my multiply, lion, normal, okay. Let me turn them all on. I'm going to change this back to my black. Okay. That's another control you have, by the way. Okay. If it's too contrasty, if your black point is too strong, you can always lighten it here. Okay. As a matter of fact, that doesn't look too bad here, like that. Okay. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I got my topmost. Okay. I'm going to make a duplicate of it. So Control J creates a duplicate. Is that the duplicate? Yeah, okay. All right. And what I'm going to do is, yeah.
I looked away for a minute. I'm sorry. Did you make, is that layer copy, you duplicated all the other layers? Or
No, just that one that I moved to the top of the heap. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
So yeah, so if this one is the one with my strongest composition. Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to bring that back to 33. All right. So in essence, we have two frames that are exactly the same, building on top of each other. All right. So, and because they're at the top of the stack, they are going to be the strongest. All right. But if we look like right here where our bicycle was, okay, here's that middle frame, right? Here's frame one, frame two, frame three, frame four, all right, and then you can see 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, the strongest one is right in the middle. So now we kind of lost that stroboscopic effect that was kind of pleasing earlier. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is, and you might want to even say I'm not gonna shift the order. I'm just gonna make a copy of that and bring it to the top. Okay. But we're only going to use a part of it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask, and we do that all the way at the bottom, the little mask tool. Except I'm going to use the Alt or Option key. You press the Alt or Option key, click on it, and it's going to make a mask that hides the layer. Then with where's my brush? Soft round brush, nice and large. Okay, I'm going to bring my opacity on that brush down to, maybe about 20%. White as my foreground color, because I'm going to be painting on a black mask. I'm just going to start painting in that doorway. All right, little by little. All right, maybe get a little bit of that barrel, the top of that. Okay. Now, all of a sudden, we go from a kind of blurry mess to something where we can sort of see what it is we're looking at. And if we want, we could even bring the opacity up. So instead of being 33, maybe 45, 50%. Okay. So now it becomes our focal point. Okay. We don't want to destroy the entire image. All right. And we got to be careful with, how much we create as a focal point, so that it doesn't ruin that layered effect. Okay. So I won't push it all the way to 100%. Okay. But I don't think, I haven't found an image that I would go beyond 50. So anyway, so what that does is now we have our focal point. Okay. Without it, with it. Without it, with it. Okay. And if you say, okay, you know what, that bush on the side, that's a little bit too much. Bring black as your foreground color and start bringing that back out. All right. Just make the corrections. Whatever is too much. Okay. You just kind of bring back. Okay. And we're almost done. All right. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a curves adjustment. And in this case, if we pull down right from the top here, we have some contrast, linear contrast, medium contrast, and strong contrast. We can try and see, that might be a little bit too much, linear contrast. That's not too bad. Okay. There we go. Without contrast, with contrast. just darkens the blacks a little bit. Or what I like to do is, you know, when you save it, it's going to bring it back into Lightroom, and we're going to take it a little bit further from there. Okay. All right. So that's looking pretty darn good. Okay. We got all that craziness. If you want, we can take a look and see, okay, what if we drop the opacity down a little bit more? If we bring the opacity down, we're definitely going to need to, make this darker. Oh yeah, there we go. That actually looks better. Okay. It definitely has more of that night feel. Okay. All right, looking good. File, save. Once it finishes saving, it's going to import it back into Lightroom. Okay. There's the one I previously did. Here's the one that just now. Going to the develop module. Okay. I'm going to create a radial gradient. I'm going to put it over my focal point. I'm going to go to my effects tab, and I'm going to bring the texture up and my clarity up. Okay. Just to give it that little bit of crunchiness, a little crunch pop. Okay. And if I want to, I could even add a little bit of exposure. Maybe not exposure, maybe highlights. Yeah, maybe not highlights. I think exposure is going to work. Okay. And a little bit of contrast. Okay. That looks pretty darn good. Close that off. And there we have it. Any questions?
I'm gonna make a comment. Even when you were showing us that very first picture from that photographer,
Yep.
the one on the Arc to Triumph.
Yeah.
What that made me think of, and this one too, is there's some element to this. If you're a certain age and did some things back then, it's very psychedelic.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, you're right.
Well, and I'm saying that from someone who's been psychedelic, but you know, you see a lot of the stuff on TV about trying to recreate maybe what it looks like, but one of the things that one would see are these trails, you know? And
yes. Yes.
something would look normal, and then there'd be all these trails, and that's why that first one you showed us from that artist, you know, with those lights along the street, you know, and the scratchiness. I go, I've seen that before.
Yeah. All right. So that's the basic construction for these. All right. I'm going to just go ahead and open these up. I'm not going to go through the whole entire process. I'm just going to show you what I did previously, and kind of walk through some of the decisions that I did. Okay. All right. You'll notice that the opacity here is at 50%. So I went a little bit more opaque with that, with my images. Okay. But if we were to take that opacity down, all right, here's the last frame I took, okay, and you can see the restaurant here on the right hand side. The reason I put that at the top of the stack was because of all this texture in here, okay, and to show you what I mean, the first image is here. All right. The middle image is here. All right. there is really no interest. There's nothing of interest. There's no texture going on here for the majority of the walk up to the restaurant. It's all this, glass, white, and stone work. Okay. So when all of these are overlapped onto each other, here, I'll show you what I mean. What do I do? Shift. Okay. 50. Okay. When these are all stacked up on each other, this is all kind of plain. There's not enough contrast. There's not enough texture there. Okay. It wasn't until I got to that last frame that, I looked at it and said, oh, wow, that's the one that does it. That did it for me. Okay. All right. But the one thing you're going to notice, let me bring these back to 100. All right. You're going to notice that this initial post is pretty much in the same spot. All right. And the way I did that, here's a little trick, is you have a ruler at the top and a ruler on the left-hand side. If you don't see the ruler, go to Windows, or go to View, Show, here it is, Rulers. Okay. Make sure that's clicked on. Okay. You want to make sure that's clicked on. Okay. Then what I can do is I can drag from that ruler, from that ruler, I can drag down this guideline. And what I did is I created a guideline, right? I don't know if you can see it. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. With my perspective, right? The camera was pretty much at the height of the lantern, all right? And there's actually the ones in the back, the height gets a little off, but you can see that for the most part, they're all pretty much fairly even, okay? So what that allows me to do is I can grab these lines, and what I did is I placed them kind of like this, and now I have a guide to go by as I bring in each additional frame into view. I just take it and line it up according to that grid that I made. Okay? Make sense? All right. Why are some of these? Oh, they got different modes on. Okay. So I just used that grid to kind of, just give me a hand. All right. And starting off at 33%, when I looked, and to get rid of them, you just click. All right. Make sure, first of all, you are in the move tool. Okay. When you see a double arrow, just drag them off. Okay. At 33%, I felt it was a little bit too translucent. This is closer to what Pep does, or Pep. But for this particular scene, I felt it was a little bit too ethereal, right? I wanted something that had a little bit more weight, just because the feel of the bricks and the size of the columns, it gave it that kind of like heaviness to it. So I felt this was a little bit too airy So what I did is I just grabbed the whole stack. And again, this is one of the things that I like about my technique over everybody else's, is everybody else gives it arbitrary transparencies. Mine are all the same. So I can grab the entire stack and make an adjustment on the fly until I get it to a point where I thought looked really, really good. And I settled on that 50%. Okay. Don't want to go too much, then what happens is the upper layers start hiding the lower layers a little bit too much. Okay. All right. And that was the end results that I got. And because even though this looks like just one pole, it's actually all the poles together. All what? 9 of them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 poles, all stacked on top of each other. Okay? Make sense? All right. Okay, so let's close that out. I don't want to save. All right, this one failed. In my opinion, it failed. But I'm going to show you why I feel it fails. Okay. First off, I only took 5 shots, five frames. Okay. And excuse me. And because of that parallax view, it made the background sweep really, really, intensely. Okay. So let me explain what I mean. Oh, and this is my base. And you can see how the black didn't quite work with this one. Okay, let me just show you what I mean. If we had kept it black, look at that. Okay. Black just wasn't strong enough. Okay. All right. Or was actually too strong. All right. So we have the street corner. We have the building. All right. We have a couple of trees going on here, and then we had the sign. Okay. And I started here for my first shot, looking this way. Okay. What's at the end of what's behind that sign? The end of the alleyway. Okay. I took 2 steps here and I shot the sign. I took 2 steps. I shot the sign. 2 steps. Shot the sign. 2 steps. Shot the sign. Okay. So even though the sign does not move in my frame, look what happens to that background. It went from a steep angle, all right, to almost 90 degrees here. Okay. And that's what, what happens when you have a subject, or in this case, a background that is very, very close. Okay. It's just like if you're driving down the highway and all the telephone poles are going, right? But if you look in the distance, that mountain, it's just kind of just sitting there, barely moving. All right. That's the same principle. Okay. In this case, because we're traveling, we're getting, all these different views. Okay. So for that reason, I think this image failed because nothing's quite recognizable in the background, in comparison to some of the other ones. All right. The only thing that really stands out is that sign. Okay. And I actually took the middle one and brought it to the top because that highlighted the sign the best. Okay. Because we went from extreme angle this way to extreme angle, what was it, this way. Okay. And everything else is pretty much the same. The only difference is I went with overlay on all of them, hard light on the top one, and instead of going, black, which you can see, just kind of like destroys the image, whereas white, because it's an additive process here, white just would blow out all your highlights. Okay, so we can control how we present it just by how light or how dark we make our background. Because remember, we're using blend modes. Okay, so this one here, in my opinion, failed miserably. Okay. All right, say no to that. And this one here, this one was my first one. There we go. Okay. And this was, I think, the most number of frames in the set. And that's one of the lessons that I learned, is that the more frames you have, the more texture you get, the more interest that starts happening in the image. Okay, especially with that parallax view. All right, because the more stuff you have closer to the camera, the smaller your steps need to be when you move the camera. All right, I was taking 2-foot steps. All right, if I were to do it again, I would take like maybe 6 inches, 8 inches to a foot, take a shot, and instead of 11 frames, I would take maybe 30, and then do the stack. Okay, but the other thing that doesn't quite work with this one is that there's no strong focal point. Okay, the building is pretty much the focal point, but it's not the most interesting building, and the building's cut off because I did not have a wide enough lens. Could I have gone around that? Yeah, absolutely. I could have done panoramic shots. Okay, and we covered that last time. But that's just way too much work that I wanted to put into this. All right. Moving forward, I would probably take a wider lens. Okay, or see if I can get further back, or what would probably be more ideal, find a different point of interest, something that's a little bit more interesting than this kind of like blah building. Okay, all right, and they're all 33%. I use overlay and normal mode. Overlay. Oh, I got a couple of screens in here. All right, the bottom ones are kind of screen. Okay, and the nice thing is we can see that progression of ghosting. All right, if I follow the corner of that building, all right, It gets, from really, really, really ghostly to, pretty solid. Okay. All right. Any questions on any of the techniques?
I already have something in mind I want to try.
I knew you would. I
Yeah,
knew you would.
you're absolutely correct when you said this is something I'm definitely interested in.
Yeah.
You lost me a little bit on in all the the technical end of it, but the idea, the gist, yeah, I can see how that can work. And I'll come home again with another 1,000 photos.
So,
All right.
Doug, I have the same thought. Can you show a website from where you're sitting?
Yes.
Can you go to trainerautobody.com?
Trainer.
TRAYNOR.
Oh, PRAYNR.
No, TR.
Oh, TR.
T as in Thompson. So it's Trainer Auto Body Shop. What? That's it right there at 109 Thorpe Avenue Street.
Okay.
Not that one.
Oh,
The one that was Trainer Auto Body there. No, well, wait a minute. The
Trainer.
one that says 109 Thorpe Street.
Oh, 109. Oh, the other one says 901. Oh, boy. I'm dyslexic. Okay.
And they used to be the same business and just sold last year, which is part of why I'm. So just go to Trainer Auto Body and look at the website.
Okay.
So here's a photo that I took of this place in 2009.
Okay.
It was my 2009 Photoshop skills because I got rid of all the phone lines. Anyway, I'm updating his website, and I got the idea watching this that what's kind of interesting about this building is the point, the way the stairs come out and there's the two signs on each corner.
Yeah,
There's a Trainer
yeah.
Auto Body sign on the left and then one on the right.
Yep.
So how would you approach this?
Okay.
What would
Well, the first thing that I would look at is from a graphic artist's point of view.
Mhm.
Okay. What is there that is more important than the doors of the building?
I'm gonna cough now too.
I know it's catchy, huh? What is more important?
Steps are pretty interesting, and it's the doorway.
Yep, but what's more important than the photograph?
The sign.
The text.
The text.
The
Well,
text.
that's not. Yeah, that's not part of the photo.
No. But it's part of the layout. That's why I said I'm approaching this first off as a graphic artist. Okay. So whenever there's any text, my impulse is to put something in the script behind that text so that it's easier to read.
Well, let me back you up then, Doug. What I was thinking when I showed you this, I showed you this because it's on the website, but I was thinking of doing this just as a photograph, and then if it worked out, putting it on the website, I might do something. But
but you still gotta keep the typography in mind. Okay. So this is a traditional layout. You have your title and subtitle, and then some kind of call to action going on here. Okay. Which is standard. Okay. So what I would do in this particular case with the image, all right, again, keeping in mind we read left to right, top to bottom, right? So we want something plain here, all right? We don't want anything to attract our attention here, okay? We want what's called a soft entry into the image, okay? Because what's going to happen is this is going to be the point of interest for the page layout. So that means the point of interest for the image needs to reside here. Okay? Because, and then what we need to do is have something that is going to divert our eye back into the page. Okay? So if we were to take the building, all right, instead of putting the doors center, all right, maybe put the doors here, okay, with the stairs, okay. The corner of the building is here, okay, and something like that. You know what I mean? Okay. The other thing, I would get rid of this.
Well, that's just, I mean, this is all, remember,
Yeah,
this is
yeah, no, I
15
understand.
years.
Yeah, I understand. Because it's redundant at this point. We got it here, we got it here, we got it here, and then we have it in the text. Okay. For interest, see if they got a couple of cars you can park, I don't know how that would look, but you might do something like that. You know? And not so much empty space here.
Well, if you walk up on the building, what's kind of neat about it, I guess, is the way the steps are and the sign on each corner and
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
artistic that it focuses like you were trying to do in that other one, so that the focus is on one of the signs, or do something so that the two this is the main one, and then
Yeah.
all the other ones.
I probably won't use that technique here, because the purpose of the image here is not to say, "Ooh, look at me, ain't I pretty?" The purpose of this is to bring attention to the text. The image is secondary.
Okay.
This gives us a sense of place, all right, but commercially, it's a little empty. There's no life here. The windows are dark. There's no people. There's no vehicles. There's no activity. There's no movement. So those are things that I would look forward first, before going too crazy with the glitz and glamour.
Way back when I did so much work to get rid of all that stuff.
Well, no,
Yeah, does not look like that at all.
you don't want distractions, obviously, but you don't want it to look like a deserted building either.
Hey, you know what I do when I take a group picture of people in a bike group? I only allow one bike in the picture.
Yeah.
So maybe just one car and this would be enough.
Yeah.
The other theory about having something other here, to back up what you're saying, I went to a real estate photography workshop where they said, don't have anything on the tables. My brother was in real estate, and his rule was have dinner plates on the table, have a couple of magazines on the table to make it look homey.
Yeah, there's a couple rules of thought on that one. Plates tend to be personal.
Yeah, that's true.
So my rule of thumb with real estate is don't put anything personal into an image. You want it to be as generic as possible, because the person's looking to buy a house, you want them to be able to visualize themselves living in that house. All right. If they look at the dinner plates and they go, "Oh, how tacky!" I could, all of
Yeah,
a sudden
that's
that's a
yeah.
negative, and it turns them off. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
That's the value of staging houses properly when
yes,
selling.
yes,
It's something I never used to do when I was flipping them, but as I watch these shows now, it's a good stage person that knows how to match the house to the potential customer. So that thing you just mentioned about plate mismatch,
yeah,
they
yeah,
know how to minimize that for their audience.
yeah,
Well, that's why these stagers make a lot of money.
yeah. They do. Yeah, they do.
Yeah, my son used one, and
Uh,
the pictures were really good.
hopefully, my uh, daughter-in-law won't ever watch this, but I'm gonna rat her out. She's got this beautiful house up in Harwington. It's not a contemporary. It's a run of the mill, um, New England style house. Okay, and she put all these contemporary, modern light fixtures that when you walk in and you look at them, they look so out of place. It's like, oh my God, how tacky. Oops, did I say that out loud? It's like, it does not fit the look of the house. She loves them, which is great. It's her house, but yeah, if you're looking to sell it, first thing I would say is you change the light fixtures.
You know
But
what I did that doesn't cost much money because I had the whole place painted. This condo is, I don't know, almost 40 years old. Original doorknobs that were horrible looking. So I had the doorknobs replaced. I have doorknobs that are meant for that are handicap accessible instead of a round knob.
oh yes,
It's
yeah,
a handle that can go up and down
yeah,
in case I decide to sell this and somebody is handicapped, or saying I'm 73 years old, in case I'm going to need it someday. But
yeah,
it wasn't a lot of money, but it just makes it look so much better.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You get that little claw thing.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah. All right. Let me see if I can just simplify this a little bit for Alan. All right. Okay.
It'll take a
So
while.
once you load, all right, you know how to load into a stack, right?
Yes.
Okay. Once you load them into a stack, the first thing I would do is create that solid color layer down at the bottom. Okay. And just make it black. So solid color, all right. Make it black, hit OK, all right. Put it all the way at the bottom. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Then take the entire stack. So click on the top one, shift click on the bottom, all right, and set your opacity to 33%. 33. All right. And that's going to get you a good 90% of the way there. Okay.
Wow.
Once you see this, then it's just a matter of saying, okay, where do I want to pull focus to? Okay. Is it a little bit too dark? Let me change a couple of these to screen mode. All right. That's usually my default. Okay. So what I did is every other one, click, hold on. Control, shift, nope, shift, nope, hold on, control. All right. Every other one. Okay. And then all I did was just go to, all right, lighten. Oh, lighten works. Overlay, yeah, it's a little bit too dark. All right, lighten works. Okay. All right, and I might say that, okay, well, maybe, instead of lighten for the top one, I'm going to go with overlay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay. And then just play around. At this point, it's experimentation. You had 90% of the work is already done. Okay. And let's say I want to, highlight this area here. Okay, not a problem. Right? I can take, in this case, probably the top one, duplicate it. So Control J duplicates it. Okay. And because it's adding another layer on top of that layer, it's going to make the opacity a little bit stronger, right? You can see that we went from, very transparent to a little bit more opaque. All right. We're going to add a layer, mask. Okay. But we don't want it white. We want it black. So Control I to invert it. Okay. Then, just like any mask, soft round brush. All right. Let's see. Make sure that white is your foreground color. I usually keep the opacity very low because I want to be able to build it up. Okay. So I find anywhere 10, 15, 20% is good. All right. And then just make little strokes until it gets looking the way you want. Okay. And you can toggle that layer on and off to kind of gauge where you are. And the nice thing about a mask is that if you go, oops, I went a little bit too much, we can switch back over to black as my foreground color. Okay. And, oh, what did I do? I went into quick mask mode there. Okay. And I can use black to kind of knock it back down. All right. Make sense?
You're right. It did simplify that. Yeah, quite a bit. And thank goodness you put the recording on YouTube.
Yeah. I still got to put last week's on. I got sick and then just
Right.
that went to the.
Everything else takes secondary. If you get sick, that's just.
Oh, I know it sucks. It sucks.
Yeah, it does.
So, but yeah, this will be going up. So hopefully that simplified it. And then from here on, it's just experiment, play around, try to learn the technique, get a sense of the nuances. But you're gonna find that every image is gonna have its own little nuances. So.
Hey, Doc.
Yeah.
So, using this image as an example, there's those cars going by, and so that's some action.
Yep.
Could you do something if you were setting this up to? I think there's a couple settings where you can get it to take 2 or 3 shots real quick, and that was your you take 2 or 3, move, take 2 or 3, so you might get some movement of this car or movement of whatever you're trying to shoot in the thing. Is that a way to think about that?
No, you know what? I'm glad you said that. Because that was actually one of the thoughts that came to my mind when I shot this image. Okay, this image I photographed from across the street. Again, I'm 24 millimeter, so from across the street I could just barely fit the building in there. Okay, and this is cropped. All right, because when you shift things, you don't get that perfect edge anymore along the outside. I had to crop it in. Okay, so I just barely fit this in. But the one thing I noticed is first of all, it won't let me draw. Hold on, it won't let me draw when it's. Okay. Oh, I don't know why it's doing that. Okay. Um, oh, this is new. Oh, that's new. Hey, look at that. They must have updated the software. All right. There were parked cars. Okay, you can see parked car there, but there were also cars that were moving along the road. You can see one here, and just off camera, right here, is a traffic light. So what happened was I took a couple of shots. The light turned red, and then all of a sudden, all these cars piled up in front of me. Okay. And I was thinking to myself, okay, if I take a shot, walk 2 paces, take a shot, it's still going to be the same cars in the same spot. All right. And because I'm doing a opacity blend, wherever anything stays in the same space, the opacity is going to get denser. So what's going to happen is all the cars in the foreground that are stopped for the light, if I take 3 or 4 frames, it's going to hide that bottom part of the building. Okay. So is that a problem? No, if what you want are vehicles in the scene to be dominant. For this particular image, I didn't want the vehicles to be dominant, so I actually took 1 frame and I waited for the light to turn green so the cars would go by and then continued. All right. Guaranteeing that there was not going to be a lot of distraction in my foreground elements. Okay. So that's something that you need to consider depending on what it is that you're photographing. Okay. Because everything's going to be translucent, the fact that there's a lot of repetition of maybe the same car, or if you know, like the ones that Pep did, where there's a lot of pedestrians. If there's a repetition of the same person, it doesn't matter because they're very, very ethereal to begin with, and they're all not in the same place. So it gives that sense of progression through time, as well as through that buildup of opacity. So it all depends on how you want to build that texture. So hopefully, but that's great question, because that is something that came up when I was shooting this one.
One other thing I learned tonight, Doug, I've
Yo.
been in Shelton for 24 years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been to Amici's a number of times. I never knew that was the Pier Point block building, and that it had such a. I never looked up.
Yeah, the Pier Point.
Across the street.
So yeah, so this is the Pier Point. It used to be a hotel. Way back in the day. A buddy of mine, Brian Lazat, he owns the Gift Boutique, which is a little bit down the street that way. Okay. This space right here, previously occupied by Evolve Computing, and before that, Kate's of Design. But he used to have a ice cream shop here called Timothy's, and this was his apartment. So he lived. Let me tell you, you want to see a beautiful apartment, you got to check these apartments out. Loft building, our loft ceilings. It was gorgeous.
I was just watching about Pier Point Morgan and his escapades in the.
Oh yeah.
I can imagine that what this looked like.
Yeah.
during the time
Yeah.
we built it. Yeah.
Yep. So, but anyway, yeah. Okay, guys. Hopefully you learned something that's going to be fun and enjoyable little project for you to attempt. Um, you can look up on YouTube. You're going to find all kinds of tutorials for this technique. Like I said, I'm trying to bring something a little bit different that I found out from my attempts at doing it that is not in some of these other tutorials. But please feel free to check out and see what everybody else is doing. It doesn't hurt to learn from multiple sources. And definitely check out Pep's work. It's brilliant. It's amazing. Look at it, analyze it, try to dissect it, and you can see the value of the number of images. The higher the number of images, there's just a certain richness to his images. And of course, the trees, the ones that he does with the trees, just the colors that he brings out, just friggin' phenomenal. All right, guys, that's it for today. Next week, Q&A, so have your questions ready. I'll see if I can have something available to talk about for next week. Okay? All right, guys, stay safe, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.